Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump has unveiled plans for a new so-called merit-based immigration system that would prioritize highly skilled and English-speaking workers while further restricting asylum seekers and immigrants who have family living in the United States. Trump announced his plan in the White House Rose Garden Thursday.
My plan expedites relief for legitimate asylum seekers by screening out the meritless claims. If you have a proper claim, you will quickly be admitted. If you don't, you will promptly be returned home.
Many lawmakers called Trump's immigration plan short on specifics and a non-starter. This is Washington State Democratic Congressmember Pramila Jayapal.
It does not include any protections for Dreamers. It does not include any plan for the 11 million undocumented immigrants that are in this country that need a path to citizenship. It undermines the family immigration system that has been the cornerstone of our country's immigration policy.
This comes as Senator Lindsey Graham has introduced a bill that would deny people the right to seek asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border, forcing them instead to take their claims to U.S. consulates in their home countries, even if their lives are in danger. Senator Graham's bill would also increase the number of days migrant children could be detained to 100, 5 times the current limit. We'll have more on immigration later in the broadcast. The Guardian's reporting a top Iranian general recently met with Iraqi militias in Baghdad and told them to, quote, prepare for proxy war with the United States. The push by the leader of Iran's Quds Force came as the Pentagon reportedly drew up a plan to send as many as 120,000 troops to the Middle East if President Trump decides to take military action against Iran. This comes as the New York Times reports President Trump has clashed with his cabinet and advisors in recent days over whether to attack Iran. The Times cited an unnamed Trump official who said Trump poked fun at his national security advisor, John Bolton, in a recent meeting with the words, if it was up to John, we'd be in 4 wars now. In Yemen, rescue workers pulled a bloodied young girl from the rubble of her home in Sana'a Thursday after an airstrike by the U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition killed both her parents and all 4 of her siblings. The latest Saudi-led strikes came as UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, warned 4 years of U.S.-backed Saudi attack on Yemen has left at least 7,300 children killed or seriously injured. This is UNICEF's Executive Director, Henrietta Fore.
Each day, another 8 children will be killed, injured, or recruited to the fighting. And every 10 minutes, another child will die from a preventable cause. Like a lack of food, with 360,000 children suffering from severe acute malnutrition. In fact, half of the children under 5 years old in Yemen, there are 2.5 million children, are stunted. And stunting, as you know, is irreversible. Yemen is a test of our humanity. And right now, we are badly failing this test.
Police arrested 4 activists Thursday inside the Venezuelan embassy after they spent weeks occupying the building at the invitation of Venezuela's government in order to prevent it from being taken over by Venezuela's U.S.-backed opposition. The Venezuelan government criticized the arrests, calling them a violation of the Vienna Treaty of 1961, which protects diplomatic missions around the world. This is Code Pink activist Tig Barry.
If the embassy in Washington, D.C. is taken, what says that the embassy in Venezuela can't be, the American embassy in Venezuela can't be taken, which sets a pretext for war.
Last month, Democracy Now! Went inside the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. To see our coverage, you can go to democracynow.org. In Brazil, tens of thousands of students, teachers, researchers rallied in cities across Brazil to protest government cuts to education. Far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's promise to slash funding to federal universities by about $1.8 billion while freezing thousands of postgraduate scholarships. This is Sao Paulo student protester Vanya Cristina.
With these cuts to federal university funding, we must make noise. People need to show the importance of science and education. As we are saying, there is money for the militia, but not for education. People will fight for education.
In Mexico, police said Thursday they discovered the body of journalist Francisco Romero outside a bar in the Caribbean coastal city of Playa del Carmen. Romero's body reportedly showed signs of repeated blows and a gunshot wound, making him the sixth Mexican journalist to be murdered this year. Romero previously worked for a Facebook news page where two other journalists, Ruben Pat and Jose Guadalupe, were murdered last year. In Nashville, Tennessee, 68-year-old prisoner Don Johnson was killed Thursday evening by the state after prison officials strapped him to a gurney and injected him with a lethal chemical cocktail of 3 drugs. After the execution, Johnson's lawyer told reporters she believes the gurgling, gasping noises he made as he died showed he suffered excruciating pain. Meanwhile, the state of Alabama executed 41-year-old prisoner Michael Brandon Samra by lethal injection Thursday. Samra was sentenced to death for his role in a quadruple murder in 1997 when he was 19 years old. The execution was carried out around 7 p.m. just after the Republican governor, Kay Ivey, denied Samra's request for a reprieve. The denial came just one day after the governor, who calls herself pro-life, signed a near-total ban on abortion into law. The U.S. Senate has confirmed Louisiana lawyer Wendy Vitter as a federal district court judge. Vitter's spoken frequently at anti-abortion rallies and has worked for years to defund Planned Parenthood. She once told the New Orleans Clarion Herald Planned Parenthood, quote, kills over 150,000 females a year, unquote. Vitter has also falsely linked abortions to cancer. In New York City, newly revealed text messages show a police commander shrugged off news about the death of African-American Staten Island resident Eric Garner in 2014 at the hands of a fellow officer as, quote, not a big deal. The revelation Thursday came during an NYPD disciplinary hearing for Officer Daniel Pantaleo, who killed Garner by putting him in a chokehold and refusing to let go, even as Garner gasped, "I can't breathe," 11 times. A text message exchange between officers just after Garner's death showed Police Lieutenant Christopher Bannon was warned Garner had no pulse and was most likely DOA or dead on arrival. The commander responded, "Not a big deal, and we were effecting a lawful arrest." Officer Daniel Pantaleo never faced criminal prosecution but has remained on the police force. He could lose his job if found guilty of violating NYPD procedures which ban the use of chokeholds. The father of US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin has completed the most expensive purchase of a living artist's work in U.S. history. Robert Mnuchin purchased Jeff Koons' 3-foot-tall metallic sculpture titled Rabbit with an $80 million bid Wednesday, though he paid over $91 million after Christie's auction house fees and taxes were added in. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has proposed redefining how the government calculates the poverty line, using a different measure of inflation. Economists warn the switch to the so-called chained consumer price index would underestimate the impact of inflation on wages, gradually chipping away at benefits like food stamps, Medicaid, and health care subsidies for millions of Americans. New York State environmentalists are celebrating after Governor Andrew Cuomo blocked the construction of a $1 billion Williams pipeline project, which would have carried frack gas from Pennsylvania's shale fields under New York Harbor. The decision came after New York's environmental agency ruled the pipeline threatened water quality with mercury and other toxic chemicals and would endanger marine life. And a federal judge in Virginia has sent U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning back to prison after she refused a second subpoena ordering her to testify to a grand jury. The order came just 1 week after Manning was freed after spending 62 days behind bars for refusing to testify about her leak of hundreds of thousands of secret State Department and Pentagon documents to WikiLeaks, including evidence of U.S. war crimes. This is Chelsea Manning speaking just before she was taken into federal custody once again.
Jails and prisons exist as a dark institution, and despite that, it doesn't frighten me or disturb me. I mean, I've already been to jail, I've already been to prison, so attempting to coerce me with a grand jury subpoena is just not going to work.
Manning faces up to 18 additional months in prison and could be fined up to $1,000 a day while she refuses to testify. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.